Okay, number 3, Rupple Road cross-section. A resolution to reaffirm the cross-section of Rupple Road from Martin Luther King Boulevard to Weddington Drive as a 4-lane boulevard. Chris?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This, of course, is a project that's been on the Transportation Bond Program since the beginning. And so what we wanted to do was just go through a presentation, talk about the project, the history of the project, and go through the staff recommendation memo. So I'll go through this with you, and we'll have questions afterward. First of all, just this is a picture of the master street plan. Rupple Road is on the master street plan as a principal arterial. This blue that you see here is Rupple Road. The blue is indicated as a principal arterial parkway, which includes 4-lane cross-section with sidewalks, bike lanes, and a median. This is actually a picture of the cross-section in our master street plan. Again, you can see the bike lanes, the 4 lanes with the median, sidewalks on both sides, and green space. Not only is it on our master street plan as a arterial, it's also on the regional plan. This is a picture of the Washington-Benton County 2015 arterial network. So those are the roadways that the Regional Planning Commission has identified as either being 4 lanes or needing to be 4 lanes. The red that you see here are existing 4-lane roadways, and the yellow are proposed. And zooming in just a little bit, you can see our arterial network on the from 540 to the east is pretty well developed. 265 is actually widened now at this point, not shown as a red. But west of 540, we don't have any existing 4-lane roadways, and this really is the only proposed 4-lane roadway, at least near in the city. So, a very important arterial roadway, north-south roadway on the west side of town. Just a brief history of this project. First, in 2002, Rupple Road was constructed as 2 lanes from Weddington to the Boys and Girls Club at a cost of $800,000, and that was the access to the Boys and Girls Club. In 2004, the Transportation Committee began developing a list of projects to be included in a potential bond package, and Rupple Road was included on that project list as an arterial street. In May of 2006, Rupple Road was presented along with the other sort of final list of projects. It was at the public meeting at the Fayetteville Public Library. And this is the picture of what was presented. This is what was 6th Street at the time, so moving north and then splitting down here. This is the remainder. But it was proposed as a 4-lane cross-section with sidewalks and a median cross-section. This is the picture that was presented at that public meeting in 2006. Back to June of 2006, the City Council approved an ordinance setting the election for the bond sales tax. And there's actually a memo from the city attorney that details some of that information from June 2006. In September 2006, voters approved the sales tax and bond issue that would end up funding $65.9 million in transportation improvements. A couple more items on the history list. 2007, the Transportation Committee recommended widening of Rupple Road between Weddington and the Boys and Girls Club be added to the bond program. That's the existing 2-lane portion between Weddington and Boys and Girls Club. And then fast forward a little bit further, in March 2013, Rupple Road near Mount Comfort was added to the bond program, and that's actually a federal aid project that we have moving forward now. We won't talk much about that particular segment, but it is an important segment of Rupple Road, so I wanted to discuss that. In May of 2013, in anticipation of the 3rd phase of bonds being issued this year, we began to kick off the design portion of Rupple Road. We had a public meeting at the Boys and Girls Club to present some cross-sections to the public, just to kind of get the design moving forward. And as it turned out, we were expecting the bonds to be issued in the fourth quarter of 2014. We actually got the bonds issued almost a year early. So we do have the funds in place that we're talking about that can construct this road. This was the picture of what was presented at the May 2013 public meeting. And again, this is starting here. This is Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, moving north across these vacant properties, then continuing on here and connecting to Rupple Road at Owl Creek School. The cross-section that was presented, you can see here, includes a 12-foot trail that was proposed in lieu of bike lanes, 10-foot green spaces on each side of the road, 2 lanes in each direction, a 15-foot wide median. It's actually a depressed median that will be an LID feature, allow the stormwater to run into the swale and run across essentially an infiltration trench prior to going into the storm drain system. We also presented proposals for the segment north of Persimmon, and this is the first portion of that. And then moving on north, this is Weddington here. So we actually included the widening of the intersection north of Weddington to kind of clean up that entire intersection. The cross-section for that is similar, 4 lanes again, with the 12-foot trail on the west side. That's actually an 8-foot sidewalk on the east side. That's an existing sidewalk. A little bit narrower median because we have a constricted right-of-way, but still a median cross-section. And then lastly, the very northern section was also presented. Again, very same cross-section, 15-foot median with the trail and sidewalks and the 2 lanes in each direction. Again, this project is not really part of this discussion. It is moving forward as part of a federal aid project, and we'll be having the discussion, the design details of that as we move through with the Transportation Committee. After the public meeting in May, the Transportation Committee, we brought the results of the public meeting to the Transportation Committee, and that's when the discussion began about possibility of constructing only 2 lanes as opposed to a 4-lane cross-section. So staff proposed a traffic study to look at the existing traffic and try to project what the future traffic would look like. That study began in September of last year and was completed earlier this year. Some of the inputs that the data that we gathered was existing traffic information on Weddington, Persimmon, Rupple, and also on MLK. I don't have that on the list. And then looking at future traffic on what traffic could be generated from the development area, and you can see the picture there was the traffic study development area that the study used. In that study, based on the density of the residential units of Rupple Row, which is a denser subdivision in the area, it was determined approximately 2,000 new residential units could occur, again, in this development area. There was no commercial development input into this, so it was really just all looking at residential. Traffic growth rates of 1.2 to 1.9% per year, which is a pretty low percentage, but matches with what's happened over the past few years. This data was used to develop using modeling software to develop a traffic model, and that model, after it was developed, was run for the 2-lane scenario and the 4-lane scenario, as we talked about, is run now and at a 20-year design year. The results of the study: 2 lanes provides acceptable levels of service in the initial design year. So right after the road is built, 2 lanes would be adequate. Using the study parameters, again, the level of development, the number of housing units, the study determined that 2 lanes would be acceptable until approximately 50 to 75% of the residential units in the study area are built. So 1,000 to 1,500 units. At that point, the model started breaking down and the 4 lanes were needed. Persimmon to Weddington, that segment, the northern segment, the existing segment, would be the first one to have unacceptable results, and of course with Weddington intersection being the most problematic. The model in the design year, travel times with 2 lanes only, is from MLK to Weddington is 32 minutes. That would be reduced to 6 minutes from MLK to Weddington with 4 lanes, so obviously a pretty significant difference. So what we have in front of you today is the 2 options, the 2 proposals. This is the 4-lane proposal, and we've added some detail based on some of the public comment. We've added roundabouts at the master street plan intersections, and but those are shown on there. Still the same cross-section, the 15-foot depressed median, the 12-foot wide trail on the west side, and the sidewalk on the east side. The 2-lane option looks similar with simply taking off the east 2 lanes and the east sidewalk. We still have the median in this area to establish the access control that the median would provide, and so the cost estimates that we'll talk about in a minute are based on these 2 proposals. In talking about the project cost, we only focused on the section south of Persimmon. That's really where we're talking about the different options. The total cost south of Persimmon for 4 lanes, $7.37 million. For 2 lanes, it's $5.67 million, a savings of $1.7 million. The potential future costs, we've talked about this quite a bit, and this is difficult to quantify, but we did look at what it would cost, the additional cost if in 10 years we came back and went ahead and widened from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. Based on 3% inflation per year and the additional difficulty of building 2 lanes next to the existing 2 lanes, the tear out that you'd have to do, the traffic control, all of those factors, we've come up with $3.2 million would be the cost of building in 10 years. If it were sooner than that, then inflation would mean less than that, obviously, or longer than that the number would go up by an inflation factor. So finally, the recommendations. Staff is recommending to move forward with the approval of the resolution that's in front of you, which is to reaffirm the 4-lane cross-section. And the reasons are, as I've stated, Rupple Road is designated as a principal arterial 4-lane roadway on the city's master street plan and on the regional plan. And looking at the big picture, you can see that arterial, the only arterial on the west side of 540, and so it's an important route, obviously. Secondly, the voters approved the transportation bond issue with Rupple Road included as a 4-lane boulevard cross-section. Funding for the 4-lane is in place. It's part of the bond program. It's budgeted now. Future funding, obviously, is more uncertain. We won't have the bond program forever. And then, as I just mentioned, future widening of going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes will most certainly cost more than $1.7 million. And I just want to say a couple more things about the traffic study first. I have a high level of confidence in the initial build year because that's based on data that we have, and we can run that model with a high level of confidence. The future years there are some assumptions made, and you can argue whether those assumptions are correct or not, or too conservative, not conservative enough. But the bottom line is we just don't have the level of confidence in that traffic study. It could take longer than 10 years, it could take much shorter than 10 years, and so that's something that I just want to say there's a danger in using that traffic study as your only item that you're making a decision on. And then lastly, just as a point of comparison, Highway 265 in 2004, I believe, was the first year that the council appropriated money for that project, and it obviously was identified as a problem at that time, 10 years ago. 10 years later, we're in the final stages of completing that project. So that's pretty typical for a state or municipal project. After you identify the problem, it's usually many years that you can actually get to move forward to construction and provide relief for those type of problems. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Alan, you had a question?
Well, not a question, just a comment, really. Chris, I just wanted to say thank you. I know you and your staff have done a lot of work on this, and the councils that came before us have done a lot of work on this. You know, this has been a long time coming, and I appreciate all the data that you put together for us, because it does help make a decision. I'm a big proponent of build it right the first time. Since this was put to a special election in 2006, and we held public meetings to explain it to the public, I think the intention was clear when they had the election in 2006, and with that, I'd like to make a motion to pass the resolution.
Second.
Okay, well, everybody hang on. So we have that on the floor. Matthew, you have a presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. Any more questions? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm trying to go through our history of this plan. When was, I remember it because it was a little controversial, especially
Yeah.
some things I said. When was the last approval of the master street plan?
I believe it was 2000 and...
It's been since I've been here.
Right, it was with City Plan 2030.
Mhm.
So when we readopted the 6 goals, we changed some of those. We added some more sections on housing, the Enduring Green Network. We brought forward the master street plan at the same time, and we adopted it thereafter. So I believe it was 2011 or 2012. We might have started it in 2011, and I actually adopted it in 2012.
Okay, that's because I'm trying to go through here. Okay, so in 2012 is when I was on the council and we discussed this as it is presented today in the master street plan, and there was a great deal of discussion at that time, and so that's what I'm trying. And then in 2013 is when we got the federal aid project for the northern end of this. Okay, which is not part of the changes, but is certainly relevant when we're talking as our street plan and this going all the way from the south end to the north end. Okay.
Okay, Sarah.
Chris, do you have a slide that shows us the Enduring Green Network overlay? Because a large part of this project bisects our Enduring Green Network.
We don't have that. We possibly can pull it up.
I know that Peter had put one together that we used for our discussion at the Environmental Action Committee last night. Is that available? I think that is an important part of this discussion, seeing as our Enduring Green Network is goal number 4 on our 2030 city plan. Thank you.
Find it.
Well, while he's looking for that, this might be an opportunity to discuss some of the recommendations for environmental best practices for the road extension that we developed last night at the Environmental Action Committee. Sandra did forward you a copy of this, but I think it is worth reading as we consider this decision. So I'm just going to read it verbatim. Whereas Goal 5 of the City Plan 2030 states that we will assemble an enduring green network, and whereas the majority of the Rupple Road extension and associated development will be constructed within the Enduring Green Network, and whereas the Environmental Action Committee shall make recommendations to other city committees and the City Council on matters concerning the environment to address environmental concerns, promote a safe and healthy environment, and maintain the natural and beauty of the environment within the city. Whereas the primary goal of the Environmental Action Committee has for many years been to speak up at meetings related to projects that affect the Enduring Green Network. Whereas the Environmental Action Committee elected to add a presentation on and discussion of the Rupple Road extension to the agenda of their March 17, 2014 meeting and identified several areas of concern, including multimodal transportation that prioritizes alternatives to single-occupancy vehicles, sprawl prevention, wildlife corridors, viewshed protection, particularly of Millsap Mountain and Mount Kessler, and watershed protection. Whereas the Environmental Action Committee opted to focus on making recommendations for optimizing the success of the road expansion and not to take a position on the number of lanes constructed at this time. Whereas the Environmental Action Committee looked to the City Plan 2030 and the Weddington Corridor Master Plan to inform many of the recommendations provided. Now therefore be it resolved that the Environmental Action Committee of the City of Fayetteville does recommend the following environmental best practices for optimizing the outcome of development along the Rupple Road Extension Corridor. Section 1 deals with transportation. We're recommending that we design for multimodal transportation that prioritizes alternatives to single-occupancy vehicles. That we employ a strategy of pedestrian-friendly nodal development designed to embody the concept of parked once. That we build it transit-ready, include bus pull-offs, crosswalks, and trail crossings in the initial construction of the roadway, plan and allocate space for future transit shelters, bus benches, and associated signage, implement physical road design strategies to encourage lower traffic speeds. The committee endorsed the components of the proposed roadway section, including the multi-use trail, sidewalks, vegetated buffers, and median swale with trees. And we request that you recognize the importance of the corridor for cyclists and pedestrians to access Mount Kessler and to cultivate a safe and inviting pedestrian and cycling experience/connection. Section 2 deals with sprawl prevention. We're requesting a complete neighborhood plan for the corridor be developed consistent with the goals set forth in the City Plan 2030 and appropriately rezone all affected land prior to construction of the extension. We prescribe a pattern of development that makes traditional town form the standard, that is walkable and urban, and follows our form-based codes. We request that we employ a strategy of pedestrian-friendly nodal development designed to embody the concept of park once. Establish a greenway to the rest of the Rupple Road extension to reinforce the corridor as the urban growth boundary for the city, and to use conservation subdivisions to establish or expand the greenway while concentrating development along the corridor. Section 3 is wildlife corridors. We recommend that we establish wildlife corridors to protect the safety and vitality of wildlife and prevent car and wildlife collisions and roadkill. We recommend that we implement the Weddington Corridor Master Plan to designate natural areas with emphasis on wetlands, forested slopes, streams, and valuable agricultural land. We request the implementation of the Weddington Corridor Master Plan recommendation to designate a north-south oriented greenway connecting the Hamstring and Owl Creek watersheds. And the Environmental Action Committee recommends that the greenway extend beyond the scope of the Weddington Master Plan and extend south to MLK to reinforce the corridor as the edge of the urban growth boundary for the city. We provide trail connections through the conservation space, allowing the neighborhood to access and appreciate the green space. We're requesting a land management plan with maintenance responsibilities to be established to ensure the long-term viability of the conservation space, and recommending the establishment and maintenance of a perpetual viewshed of Millsap Mountain and Mount Kessler, and that we landscape with native plants and trees to reduce water and maintenance demands, provide habitat and food for wildlife, and enhance the aesthetic appeal of the corridor. Section 4 is watershed protection. We want to require that all development within the Enduring Green Network use low-impact development guidelines, that we employ low-impact development strategies in construction of the roadway to enhance filtration and pretreatment of stormwater runoff, and that we designate natural areas along stream sides to protect the health and the vitality of the watershed. So regardless of which scheme we move forward with, I hope that we will take those recommendations to heart and optimize the experience of this roadway.
Very good. I'm sorry, Matthew, you had a presentation.
No, not at all, Mayor, thank you. Are we ready, Chris? Right. I'm gonna walk down there so it's easy.
Sure, absolutely. Did y'all find that map for Sarah yet? Okay.
Well, a map has been included in the packet from the Environmental Action Committee that I forwarded.
Have a laser? It's been a while since I've been down here holding my hat in front of you guys like this. probably 6 years or so. Well, thank you. You know, I certainly appreciate all the history of this project. And first I want to say, you know, that I want to talk a little bit about this item tonight, even given the history of it, because, you know, I've always tried, and this is my 6th year, my previous 5 years, to be thoughtful about our future. And I made some mistakes my first year, and since then I've really tried to demonstrate the utmost respect for my colleagues. Alderman Farrell, you might remember helping me with some of that. And most of all, I want people to understand that I'm passionate about my service here, and hopefully I can communicate some of that. But before I get started, you know, I think I want to address one thing that's out there in the public, and that is, you know, I think sometimes people have this simple mental model of politics where they want to think that one side is being pitted against another. And I know some of that has come out in this discussion. Because this project has been so important to the mayor and has been such a long history with the mayor, I want everybody to know that I have the utmost respect for Mayor Jordan. Some of my most important legislative achievements, some of the moments I'm most proud of, have only come about because he and I have been able to work together. And what's great about Fayetteville is that we're able to have these kinds of respectful discussions about issues like this. We're able to talk about the facts and not let our opinions get away of our friendships. So thank you, Mayor. You really have been a mentor to me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Second, I want to emphasize that I think unity of the council is the most important aspect to demonstrate. I'm not here to try to force an issue. I think there are some larger concerns that this item of discussion becomes useful for bringing up, and so that's what I want to do today. And by the way, I want to make sure everybody understands that this is not about taking money from one part of town and bringing it to my ward that I represent. My preference to use this money that I think is overspending would be to distribute it all up and down College Avenue, and I'll get to the details of that towards the end. This isn't just about Ward 2. I really think that there are some compelling reasons to consider the whole city. So why am I even up here? Well, first, I think the traffic study is suspect, and I appreciate that Chris ended with that cautionary tale about the traffic study. We can start with, this is what I think is the most justified action. We do 4 lanes at the top, where we have the road right now. That'd be a widening project, and 4 lanes at the very bottom at MLK, where we're going to have to build a bridge regardless. Those are the 2 most expensive ends, and those are also the 2 ends that bring us the most benefit in terms of traffic. This is an option with the 2 lanes in the middle that was not modeled at all in the study. Was not modeled at all. Earlier we heard the statistic that the delay with the 2-lane option was 32 minutes and the delay with the 4-lane option was 6 minutes. In this option that goes down to 11 minutes. So it's a significant difference. Almost all of the delay is on the very north side. I got the clicker. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. You know, with this traffic study, which I asked that we do because I was skeptical that development had picked back up like it did before the recession. We assumed 2 things. First, we assumed it was going to be a major traffic corridor, and second, we assumed it would also be a development corridor. Those were the 2 assumptions. By the way, we've never done a traffic study like this in the history of the city where we assumed development was going to occur. What we assumed was that the density would be a little more than 6 units an acre, and that number came from the row houses that are already on Rupple. In other words, that's the highest likely density to occur in the area as development happens in the future. So I think that we were being very liberal in trying to show how quickly this would develop. The conclusion, Chris touched on this, is that sometime between home number 1,000 and number 1,500, we would need 4 lanes. Now, to give you a little bit more history, back in 2003, we did the first citywide transportation plan, the BWR plan. Some folks have called that the Build Wider Roads plan. But actually, it turned out to be the basis for a lot of important decisions at this city. I'm not sure that criticism is totally justified. It was the basis of our alternative transportation master plan. Got some transit in there, and is the basis of the bond program. But in that, it looked at Rupple and it recommended 2 things. Number 1, get all the right-of-way at the beginning so you don't have to disrupt the neighborhood later. And number 2, build it as 2 lanes because you don't need them for 20 years. So let's talk growth, because that's really what it's about, trying to decide when home number 1,000 and home number 1,500 is going to occur. Between now and 2033, we're looking at 43,000 more people moving to Fayetteville, which means we have to build about 20,000 more homes. So the question of the day is, how quickly do you think, how many homes do you think are going to end up on that 1.5-mile long red line? We can talk about this. I think this is a question about opinions, but there are some facts that could inform this discussion. I think there's no question development is going to occur on Rupple. There's absolutely no question about it. The question, I think, the only question is the pace and the scale. If you go out there and drive, as most of us have, to check out this project, you'll notice there are many undeveloped properties north of this red line, on Weddington, on MLK, and elsewhere through the city. If we just look west of 540, there are many more properties with development capacity that would support a higher scale, a higher density. In other words, they'd be more desirable for developers closer to 540 and closer to Weddington and closer to MLK, and those are the most likely places to develop first. Also, we have this assumption that if we build 4 lanes, the development will happen even more quickly, but I think if you were to drive up on North Gregg and see some of those properties that have been spade ready for almost a decade, you might start to question that assumption. So we should ask ourselves first, I think, if we assume the right density. The row houses are at 6 units an acre, but the average West Fayetteville development is 3 units an acre, and I think you remember just about a month or 2 ago, we actually approved lowering the density on the last phase of the Mountain Ranch project. It is, in my opinion, unlikely that we will see 6 units an acre all up and down Rupple. But if we're going to build this at 4 lanes, what we should do tonight is make sure we direct staff to bring forward a rezoning plan so that we can ensure we get that kind of scale and we can make sure that 4 lanes are going to be worth it. I think a final question here in terms of density is we have to ask ourselves what density we're really willing to support as a council. You know, I'm in my 6th year here. I've seen several West Fayetteville rezonings come forward. Almost every time, if it's anything other than single-family homes at about 3 or 4 units an acre, it's a knockdown, drag-out series of meetings, and it's very hard for people to end up supporting that kind of scale. That's a conversation we need to have now so we can guarantee 4 lanes are going to be used if that's what we decide. So here are the arguments for doing it now. Weddington, we all know that's a perpetual traffic jam. It's terrible for people that are driving out there. We think it costs less in the future. I'll talk about that a little bit. Major traffic corridor. I'll address each one of these in turn. And this last one, I think, is the only point, in my opinion, that doesn't have a great counter-argument, and that's why I don't want to force anything tonight and try to raise these broader questions. And I'll come to that last point at the very end. So it costs more to do it later. Well, you know what? That's absolutely true. But all construction projects go up by the same amount over time. That means if we choose, for instance, to not invest in College Avenue, it will cost just as much more in the future as building Rupple would cost more in the future. That means we don't really save any money, we're just shifting money around from one project to the next. A delay on College today will absolutely cost more. One thing that hasn't been talked about is the maintenance. For every 10 years that those extra 2 lanes aren't needed, the maintenance costs amount to about $45,000 in today's accounting. So that's something that needs to be considered. On neighborhood disruption, we like to draw comparisons between Garland and Crossover. Well, you know, when we built Garland, when we built Crossover, when we built places like Mission or Old Wire, places that we think need to be widened today, we didn't buy all the right-of-way we needed. We didn't build sidewalks. We didn't plant trees. We're not going to make that mistake on Rupple no matter what happens. So I think that will be a significantly less disruptive to the neighborhood if we chose to build these 2 lanes in the future. So about the schools, one thing I have a grave concern about with the study, and I've heard expressed from several Ward 4 residents in the neighborhood, even those who support going with 4 lanes, is the speed. This study didn't consider pedestrian activity, and we presume that because of the schools being in close proximity, that many of these homes will be occupied by families with school-age children who will want to walk to school. That's something that wasn't considered at all in the study. It rated each of the scenarios by something called a level of service. That's transportation engineering lingo. Well, there are two kinds of level of service. There's the conventional level of service, and there's what's called the urban level of service, which accounts for pedestrianism, and those weren't used in this study. Based on speed studies we've done on the north section of Rupple, where just north of Weddington, on one side of the median we have 2 lanes, and on the other side of the median we have 1 lane. The difference between the 4-lane and the 2-lane scenario is about 40 miles an hour, what the speed limit should be according to the engineering book, and 47 miles an hour what the speed limit should be according to the engineering book, which means we have some significant hurdles to overcome if this street is actually going to be safe for the people who live on it. That's something we can take up at Transportation Committee after we've made this decision tonight when we get into detailed design. But if that's something you're concerned about, I think we all need to hear from you now so that staff understands that that's something that needs to be addressed seriously. Because I have asked at least 3 times in meetings what the induced speed, not the speed limit that's posted, but the induced speed of the road will be, and I've not gotten a straight answer. Let's talk about Weddington. I don't propose we rename the street to this, but I heard this from a resident and I thought it was kind of funny. Or not so funny, depending on how you look at it. This is something else. We all know that we've heard the refrain that we should do absolutely anything we can to fix Weddington. But the study didn't take into account any of the interchange improvements that are coming or any of the signalization improvements that are coming, which are the 2 most impactful interventions that we can do to help traffic on Weddington. After the density assumptions, this is really where things start to break down. And that's because, according to our own study, the worst case scenario where we only build 2 lanes on this middle section that I'm talking about and never come back to build the other 2 lanes, the worst case scenario, the average commuter on the west side is delayed for less than 1 minute longer than if we'd built all 4 lanes. That's $1.7 million to save the average commuter 1 minute of their time on the west side. And by the way, that's looking 20 years ahead to the traffic in 20 years. That's not an initial year calculation. That's about $30,000 a second. So the question is it really needed so soon? The first version, we got 2 drafts of this study, a final draft and the first version that came back to us. The first one said 4 lanes wouldn't be needed at all for 20 years, and we sent it back for a rewrite. We asked them to capture more acreage at 6 units an acre so that we could try to justify 4 lanes. It still came back inconclusive. I really think we've done everything possible we could to use this study to justify 4 lanes, including leaving out the most likely alternative that I'm talking about tonight, including assuming the highest possible density, and it still comes back inconclusive. Finally, if 2 lanes are enough to handle the traffic, and it's as a traffic corridor, and it's the development that means another 2 lanes are needed, we should treat this road like we treat every other road in town. And the development should pay for the extra 2 lanes. That's what we do all over the city. We require developers to put into an off-site improvement fund exactly for things like this. And if the road impact fees had been passed several years ago, we'd be doing that here too. So, my proposal is let's buy all the right-of-way, let's build all the sidewalks, let's plant all the trees so we don't have that kind of neighborhood disruption we would have in the future. Let's put that money into a place that gives us a faster payoff. If construction prices go up for every project, then we should be thinking about where to put our money to maximize our return. So, everybody's seen this picture up top, and everybody sees this picture on the bottom every day. Every visitor who comes to Fayetteville sees that picture on the bottom. Every visitor. They all travel on college. Goal number 1 up there is we will make appropriate infill and revitalization our highest priorities. Not our second highest or somewhere on the line. It's our highest priorities. And we've never had any kind of incentive program for that. So this is where I start talking about the broader issues. Like I said, I'm not trying to force anything tonight. I really think that presenting unity is the most important thing. But this kind of decision comes up with almost every transportation funding decision, not just with the bond program, but with our CIP and with so many other things. When it comes to city budgets, it's a zero-sum game, and our decisions have real consequences. All the red lines on the edge, those are all the streets that are on our master street plan or proposed developments in our planning area, and this was put together a few years ago, so some of this has changed. That's the trajectory we're on. If you look at the red blocks on College, that's all what we call the elastic fabric or the open space, those two things put together. And what that is, those are the properties that are ready for redevelopment. Now, technically speaking, if we were aggressive about this, we could fit at least 30,000 people, probably more, in those red squares. Now, I'm not proposing to make a decision to do all that tonight, but it's a compelling alternative scenario that I think is worth having a conversation about how to kickstart, and whether that's driven by this $1.7 million or the 2.1 that we already have allocated in the bond program, or the CIP, or something else. This is a scenario that is better for all of us, and I'll show you why. First, let me show this isn't just a capricious, half-baked idea. This has actually been worked on for some time. Here we have the College Avenue corridor from the square up to the mall. On the left, you see highlighted in yellow is the elastic fabric I described. These are the old, run-down buildings that don't make up very much of the property in percentage-wise, and it's also filled with oversized commercial parking lots. This is textbook redevelopment potential. In the middle, we see the red. These are proposed buildings, and I'm sorry for the resolution. The file I sent isn't as clear. But those are a scenario of housing and commercial infrastructure that fits within the existing fabric. This meets the existing neighborhoods. It doesn't intrude on the neighborhoods, and this really shows the potential on the right of being able to fit this kind of vision into the resources we already have in the city. Now, why housing? You know, College itself could be a destination. It seems silly to say this, but have you ever said to yourself or your friends, let's go down to College Avenue and see what's happening, check something out? People could be proud to live near College. Businesses could be proud to be on College. They aren't today. They're struggling just to survive on College. And housing is the solution to that. With housing, you can create unique places that have identities and narratives unto themselves, and that allow people to patron businesses just by walking out their front door, which means they patron them more often because it's more convenient. The way I would go about this, to kickstart this, because it's going to take a lot more than $2.1 million or even 2.1 plus this money. We take a surgical approach to this, and we identify the places where our money would absolutely go the farthest. If I were king of the world and could dedicate all the money I needed to do this exactly the right way, to do it the most effectively, I would start with these three intersections. The first would be Rolling Hills at College. You see within 1 mile, we have Washington Regional Medical Center, one of our major employers. We have Fiesta Square, where there's a grocery, and Butterfield Trail, a school. In addition, we have that elastic fabric, which means this area isn't just ripe for redevelopment, it's ripe for rapid redevelopment because of those employment centers. The second intersection I would choose would be Poplar and College. This is kind of a scary turnoff or a hairy turnoff if you're trying to get to Woodland Junior High. Also within 1 mile, we have a major employment center and a grocery store and a school again. Finally, in South Fayetteville, 15th and School is a similar scenario. There's no education center here, but we have one of the best parks in the city. We have a grocery, and we have another major employer. Each one of these would allow our money to go farther than it would just by picking two ends on the street and trying to build sidewalks from one side to the other. There are federal and state grants and matching programs available to make our money go farther, and also, again, we could use those off-site improvements with developers. We could match them to offer them an incentive to be down here. The way I would do that, and this wouldn't take too long, is we set aside some of that money for cost sharing of these things, and we let the market figure out parking. Right now, our parking requirements are cost prohibitive for many developers, even though they know best what it takes to get their developments paid for and make them successful. In mid-range, we're in the middle of negotiating a transit plan that's concurrent with the university transit planning effort to make a midtown, downtown, southtown bus route a priority would immediately set these intersections off. And I'm sure that you'll be hearing from developers who'd be interested in these properties were we to enact a plan like this. So why? Why do I care so much about all this? Here's the reason in one graph. This shows the tax yield that comes per acre according to what's built on the land. This is why an investment in College Avenue is better than an investment in Rupple or an investment in most other places in town. If you see where the arrow is, that's a mixed-use, low-rise building. That's very typical of the kinds of things we see on the square or that we see on Dixon Street. It's a very traditional type of architecture, and that's the way Fayetteville used to build. That generates more than 10 times the revenue per acre of your typical big box store or single-family neighborhood. More than 10 times. What does that mean? Well, maximizing property tax revenues means revenue for the library, means revenue for the pension funds, means more revenue for the school district, means more money for maintaining our infrastructure. It goes farther for everything, and it makes us a more resilient city when we go into a recession because property taxes don't fluctuate. And here's the kicker. Within 1 mile of College and 71, there are more than 14,000 jobs. That's the lion's share of the jobs in this city. There are also 30,000 people living within 1 mile of this corridor. That's 42% of the city. This isn't a Ward 2 issue. 42%. 2.1 million is not enough. 1.7 million is not enough. We need more, and we need to kickstart it. We need to get started now. So coming back to this. I said that this was the only argument, that I don't really have anything, I don't have a great counter for this. I think this is a fair argument. Absolutely. But consider this. This is the broader issue. With so many people living in this corridor, it's on us to figure out how to jumpstart the redevelopment. It's on us. There are 9 people that are elected, and the buck stops with us. You know, according to the emails we've received, even with a controversial reallocation attached, it's 1-to-1. Imagine if it didn't have a controversial reallocation attached. How many more people in Fayetteville would be supportive of us taking decisive action on improving this part of town? I think at the very least, this outpouring of public support today makes a compelling case to discontinue our neglect of this corridor in a big way. You know, I really do think there's room on the council for all approaches. Not everybody's going to approach a decision using the numbers like I might. There's room for all of us to make decisions the way we make. And I think all of our hearts are in the right place. I have a deep respect for every one of you, no matter what your decision is on this issue or on any other issue. And I truly believe we are strongest when we're unified, and that's why no matter what the council's desires are tonight, I'll vote with you. Absolutely. 100%. I'm talking about this because these issues are bigger than this one decision. And we have to start discussing them seriously. And if we can't consider these kinds of facts or these kinds of criticisms of this study for Rupple Road because we made a promise 8 years ago, maybe we can begin to consider them for other decisions instead of continuing to make all of our decisions by intuition. In the 80s, we started developing land at a rate of 3-to-1 compared to our population growth. It hasn't just made us environmentally unsustainable, it's made us, this is a path to financial ruin. We barely made it through the last recession because of the smart management of the city is the only reason we did. You know, some people are going to take this and they're going to try and say, he doesn't like cars at all. This is all about something else. I think that's a little funny because getting rid of all the cars to solve some kind of transportation problem is like trying to solve obesity by stopping eating. On the other hand, trying to solve all the traffic problems by building bigger roads is like trying to solve obesity by buying bigger clothes. So, you know, we can have a can-do or a can't-do attitude about college. I think we should have a can-do attitude. I think we should be creative. I think there are going to be challenges because it's more complex than any other challenge facing us, but we can do it. I think it's up to us to dedicate funding towards it. The buck stops with 9 people. I think it's up to us to make sure our most important corridor, 42% of the city lives here, 14,000 jobs, to make this an economic development priority, the highest priority. It's already in our 2030 plan. I'll leave this here and end this here. You know, again, I emphasize unity on these issues. I think these questions are broader. I think there's a lot of room for support for these broader issues, despite what is decided about Rupple Road today. But I think this has provided a perfect forum to get people talking about this sort of thing. And this stuff hasn't been seriously talked about, I don't know, ever. If there's ever been meaningful revitalization for College Avenue. It's quaint, the notion that if you just build sidewalks, the development's going to come in. You have to do so much more. So I know we have a motion on the floor. I would move that we amend the motion to include a direction to staff to bring forward a rezoning proposal for Rupple Road at the same time as they bring forward a contract to build it.
Okay. Matthew, when you say rezoning proposal, what, on the amendment, what do you...
I think staff needs to develop that, because if we're going to build 4 lanes, and our own study tells us that the extra 2 lanes are only needed due to development, and we have questions about how fast or what kind of scale that's going to occur at, we need to make sure those 4 lanes are needed. We need to make sure the development happens on that road to justify this expense, and the way to do that is with a development plan, and the first part of that is a rezoning proposal.
Just ask.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Well, we've heard some wonderful things tonight. I tend to agree with most all of them. Well, I'll get to my points later. What questions do we have, Council, for Matt or Chris on this? Let's start with that. Then we'll open up for public comment. Yes, I do.
I called Chris today to find out exactly how much money we had set aside for college at this time. And I'm assuming that's the 2.1 you were talking about?
Yes.
Let me just explain college. Okay, let's just start with that.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. We had the proposal for the bond program, and I'm sure folks are going to address this. I see Councilmember Farrell and Lucas in the back. I'm sure they will have some comments on all of that at the time. But we did the first phase of college, and it was in the bond program. But everything else was outside the bond program. Any other extensions to college. So in a meeting, I ran across, well, I'll be honest with you, I ran across Pete Heinzelman, and he wanted to know if we were going to do any more improvements on college. And I said, well, Pete, we have a list of stuff we're working down, because there was a list that council in 2006 came up with. Actually, to be honest with you, I was the representative of Ward 4 on that street committee, and everybody wanted something. I mean, traffic calming in Wilson Park. Folks wanted Cato Springs Road done. Folks wanted 265 done. And so Rupple Road was the most expensive piece of that. And we had went through I cannot tell you, well, I'll get to that later. I can't tell you how many public meetings we went through on Rupple Road and reestablishing what everybody was looking at. But we got to college and all the money was gone in that phase. There's 3 phases in that bond issue, correct? Help me out here. I forget things these days. But this phase 1 was being worked out, and Rupple Road is the last, now I'll give you the list here, is the last part of that. I mean, the folks have waited like 10 years out there for improvements on Rupple Road. Well, when Pete said that, I came back to the staff about a year ago. And I said, is there any money we can come up with college? And Chris and Jeremy and staff said, yes, we have some savings from the other projects in the bond issue that we could apply to College Avenue. So I said, make it happen. The first thing I wanted to occur was to decide which way we were going to go on college. To be honest with you, I wanted to go college south. I did. The street committee decided to go college north. I said, okay, fine. Then that's the way we'll go. So a year ago, we decided to put $2.1 million into more improvements on college, which is going to start probably the latter part of 2015, because you've got to have a year of design and all the engineering that goes with it. But there's going to be improvements there. So, but we still have not kept our promise to the people in the western part of this city. And I for whatever weaknesses I may have, when I tell you something, I give you my word on it, that's what I'm going to do. And I made a promise a long time ago, for Rupple Road and whatever traffic studies. And do I think the intersections are a bad idea? I absolutely do not. I think they're a great idea. I think the green initiatives, Sarah, that you brought forth are great ideas. And it can be incorporated in this road. I don't know how yet, but we can figure that out. And I'll get into some more of the history, but the college, that's where the college funding came from. And it's there, and it's to be used on improvements on college in 2015. I'm not trying to keep any improvements from college. I support the improvements on college. I did the last time. I do now. Well, we also have this issue out west that we've got to deal with. And the people, we did a public comment session in 2006, and we presented that very thing to the people out there. And they said, this is what we want. I'm just working with what the public has weighed in. The street committee, we added the boulevards in 2007, really. We sort of cemented those in. There was probably some folks on the street committee probably wasn't crazy about those boulevards. I was, but we did. But that's kind of the history of where the funding came from. Now, what other questions do you all might have?
And my point is...
I'm sorry, I probably rambled on there more than what I should have.
No, that's great. Chris, our engineer, had said we're in the design phase, and it's probably going to be in 2016. And I just felt like that was important for people to know that we're working on college. We're already working on college. And yes, we need some more, but we've had that money allocated for a while. I mean, we can't do everything at once. I mean, we have construction all over the city right now. So I think that's something we have to remember.
What other questions do we have from the council before we open it up for public comment?
And Mayor, just,
Yes, ma'am.
Chris, just to reemphasize something you said, I believe you said that it takes 10 years approximately to complete a project after the problem is identified. So I think to this point that Alderman Gray's bringing out, it takes a long time. It's something I've learned on the council, sort of surprised about. We vote on something and then it takes a while.
Certainly, yeah. I use 265 as an example. It took 10 years. They don't all take that long, but typically you identify a problem, then you figure out how to fund it, which can take a few years to go through the CIP process or whatever. Then the design, permitting, right-of-way acquisition, all those things can take a couple of years. So it can easily take 4 or 5 years from the time you identify a problem to the time you can go to construction.
Thank you very much.
Chris, there seemed to be a difference in the amount of time saved you said 24 minutes, and Matt said only a minute. Where do you get your numbers?
The numbers that I got were from the travel times in the traffic study report.
I'm just curious, there seem to be...
That is page... In looking at the northbound traffic, so page 63 is the 2033 northbound, and the total travel time is 32 minutes. So then page 68, I'm sorry, page 73 is the northbound travel time for the 4-lane build, 6.1 minutes.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
And I have one.
I'm sorry.
That does not include that's not describing what I was proposing, is it? I mean, we talked about this last week, didn't we?
Yes, I think there were, as we discussed, we didn't have the 4-lane north and 2-lane south, which was the proposal that you brought forward. We didn't run that travel time, so trying to extrapolate some of that data from the data that you have and coming up with a solution, sometimes it doesn't work because everything has to work together. These are just the numbers from the charts that were developed. So I apologize if there was some misleading there, but some of that is it gets kind of complicated, and you can sometimes misapply numbers.
Chris, I appreciate these numbers. This is looking at the time on Rupple Road. But the problem, and I travel this 3 times a week at least, is not Rupple Road. It's Martin Luther King and Weddington. And if there was some way to get north and south where you're not getting on I-540, it can take you, I mean, here's what I'm thinking, and I know it as a fact. That intersection at I-540, going from there to Salem, is where it is sheer havoc. So I don't care what's going up and down the minutes on Rupple because it's not developed yet. And I said this when we talked at the street plan. I'm from Prairie Grove. If I was a kid, I had a Cutlass 442, I'd be flying through there and getting tickets regularly. And I hope that doesn't happen, and I hope we can control it. But the problem we have right now is looking at alternative routes to get some of the traffic away from these snarling intersections that are so dangerous and create so much havoc and offer an opportunity for people from Salem and on west to go north and south. And there is a lot of that traffic. I'm one of them. And I have to, that's part of my work, it's part of my trail, and I see it 3 times a week at least. So I just want to say that this a minute here and a minute there is not what the problem is. It's relieving the congestion and coming up with a plan of connectivity so that we can maturely, with connectivity, have alternative routes. And that's what we've talked about so often in our community.
That's
So
right.
I wanted to point that out as you're talking about this minute here and minute there.
That's a good point. Okay, if there's not any other questions, let's start with the public. Please introduce yourself. Oh, well, here comes a man that needs no introduction.
Mayor, Alderman, my name is Bobby Farrell, 2413 Twin Oak Court, Ward 3, Lord's Ward, I used to say. Hope that doesn't get anybody going. You know, I tried to track the genesis of this project tonight, but Chris, you did a very good job in going through that. I think everybody in this town knows what I think about taxes. I never voted for any levies. I never voted for impact fees. But I not only voted for this tax, I and a bunch of other people, staff people, aldermen, businessmen, people from all over this community, when they spent hours and hours and hours going through this, and we get into these meetings where we had a big list of what we were going to do. And then we would cuss and discuss and cuss and discuss, and we got it down. And I might add, Matthew, the only way we got off the center deal was to agree to go College Avenue first. You can follow the math on the rest of that deal. Because that was the first thing out of the barrel that went. But, in all seriousness, you know, I understand and respect that people have different ideas about this, but the mayor said something a while ago that I take really very serious and to heart. There are some businessmen here tonight that help raise money. We did an education campaign in this community, and what we did was we said, this is, if you will approve this tax for what we have enumerated here and vote for it, we will build it. I promise that. I don't see, and as far as I'm concerned, there are no buts after the voters approved this. And if the mistake is ever made to try to pull off of that or add a but in there, I think you can look for real trouble and a rededication of any kind of revenue measure in the future, or there's a danger there. When you tell people you're going to do something, you better do it. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council. My name is Rob Moore. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Environmental Action Committee as a member. I am going to let you all fight out this issue on 2 lanes and 4 lanes. I would highly recommend that you look over the BMPs that we sent up, specifically as I support all 4 sections on sprawl prevention. Not only is this the edge of the urban growth boundary, this is also smack dab in the middle of our green network, enduring green network. Regardless of any agenda that you may generally see come out of the environmental side of things, this is just plan ahead of time before we start building this, whatever that looks like, and that goes down to rezoning. Both plans talked a lot about rezoning and the need for it. I just strongly encourage the council to take that seriously. Y'all have a vision for what you want this to look like, and I would strongly encourage that you address that before you break any ground on the road. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
My name's Rex Dodge, and I live on Rolling Hills, and I'm against the movement that Mr. Petty talked about, so I don't have any axe to grind there. The gentleman, Mr. Tennant, he spoke my language when he said, someone said he traveled, or he said he traveled outside of Fayetteville. It's really an issue not to look up at that screen or hear. I forgot what several people said by the time they got through reading all this information to me. Well, I'm going to bring Bill Clinton into this to make it simple. Okay? First of all, I think, and I thank you, Mr. Jordan, Mayor Jordan, for standing up for what you said. You said, we've been doing this for 10 years, so let's do something. Let's get it done. I saw Steve Clark on the TV this evening, a big smile. If anybody could go out there and do it, he could do it. But I have had the privilege of being able to talk to Bill Clinton before, and he said, when he was running for governor, he said this one thing. He said, I'm going to go get on that airplane, and I'm going overseas, and I'm going to bring business to Fayetteville. And he also said when Air Force One landed here, when Alice Walton, he was the first one off of the plane, and I took my daughter out there. I said, you want to see history being made? And Bill Clinton stepped off second, and he said, if it hadn't been for Alice, this airport wouldn't be here. You know how many people were against us on getting this airport. Branson, Tulsa, and everybody else fought against it. But Bill Clinton, he said, this airport is going to take us to the world. But believe me, it's going to bring the world to us. So I don't need to look at all these studies. I'm going on Bill Clinton faith. And I will be the first to tell you that if you're going to make a decision, travel outside of Fayetteville and see what they've got to offer in some of these cities in the Far East where they don't have a choice. They have to go out to the outside perimeter. They have to move out there because of necessity. They've got so many people, but they've managed to do it. I asked them the question, well, why do you go out here and build this circle? They just start from the inside and go out. And they said, well, because it gets more congested in the city, and the more we move outside of the city, the more that people, businesses will come. There's going to be people stay in the city, but I say, you know, the business people in Fayetteville, I don't feel sorry for them on College. It's just like this last ice storm. I almost got killed in front of McDonald's because they elected not to grade their area, because if they did that and they missed a spot and I came onto the premises and I was injured, I can sue them. So they elected not to grade their business. I said, you know, that's what's wrong. But I said, send somebody like the mayor, and I'll chip in if it's a money situation. I think everybody should chip in, and go to one of these places and see what a boulevard looks like, and see the difference between a boulevard and 2 lanes. And on a safety issue, you know, we had a gentleman killed out on the highway out there, and he was he was going east into the sun. Well, if you live on the west, and I drove 2 years from the west to the east in the sun, and I'm living by the grace of God, because you can't see anything. But I said, all these numbers and everything, with all due respect, I felt like sometimes tonight you guys were being admonished. You know, this is not, don't take this personal, Mr. Petty, but I think everyone here should consider this, because I think this is one of the most important steps for Fayetteville at this time. And I remember what he said. He said, the world, it's going to take us to the world. We can put China, we can put 747s in there, but they're coming to us. So I don't think we need to do any traffic study. I think we need to send the mayor or Mr. Clark outside of Fayetteville and come back and take a photographer with you, do a movie, and come back here and show what some of these cities have done. And and then when you get to that point, you'll be happy you did. You'll know you either made the right decision. But I said, you know what? Bill Clinton could solve this problem in less than 30 minutes. And I wouldn't be, I tell you what, I would, if I was mayor of Fayetteville, I wouldn't be afraid to call him and say, hey, Mr. President, we're in a situation here where we need your help. You are a fellow Arkansan.
You wouldn't have his phone number, would you?
Well, I bet I could get it. You know, but I say we're making this much, much more difficult, and we're all in the same boat. And I said, you know, if we put this off, we're going to have a lot of accidents. We're going to have a lot of people killed in construction zones. So, I mean, one person is too much. I mean, if you really think about it, one person is too much to lose if we don't act. And that's basically, I remember Bill, he said, he walked up to a friend of mine. We were on the Capitol grounds down there celebrating the Vietnam Memorial. And we were standing there talking, and next thing I knew, Bill Clinton standing right by me. And he stood there for about 45 minutes, and he told us, he said, I went to Taiwan, and he said a company was wanting to relocate somewhere, and he said, I went to Taiwan, and he said, I got business coming into Arkansas on parking meters. And boy, he explained this. I didn't fully understand all of it, but so when he came up here to running for governor, when he walked in the room, I pointed my finger at him, and I said, I knew enough about him by that time. I said, the global governor. And Bill looked at me and of course, naturally, he thought I was against him. So he came right to me. He'd always knock out the opposition right off the bat. And he came over to me and he said, "What'd you call me?" I thought, boy, you know, security around him. He said, I said, "The global governor." He said, "Gosh, I like that. Can I use that in my speech tonight?" I said, "Well, yeah, it's free." I just, you know, and he said, "Well, thanks." And when he got up and gave his speech at the rodeo grounds at Fayetteville, he said, "I met a guy out here tonight." And you know something else? He knew my first name, and I'd met him a year before. Now, I thought it was trickery, but people said, no, Bill Clinton had a steel trap mind. So he could solve this problem, and you all would be better off. I mean, you wouldn't have to go out here and drive up and down Rupple or Rupple. I don't know which it is, tomato or tomato, but you could solve this problem, and I guarantee you Bill would be glad to solve it for you. So,
I might be needing those parking meters, so
okay.
excuse me of using those from time to time, so.
But anyway, if you decide to do that, I think you'll be surprised that he will be open to assistance. So, that's
Sir-
all I have to say, but,
Sir, are you saying we should keep it 4-lane?
pardon me?
Bottom line, are you saying we should keep the plan 4-lane?
I believe so.
I'm trying to get...
For 4 lanes?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Because it's gonna, I said, you know, when you look, I read what the mayor said.
I got it. That's all I needed to know.
Okay, now, you know, I'm like Bill, or I'm like Ronald Reagan now, I paid for this microphone. You know, if you remember that, you know. So don't try to cut me off. I'm doing a lot of nodding at you when you were talking. So don't cut me short. I don't see anybody else
I'm not cutting you
short
off.
tonight.
I needed to get to the point because I wanted to be sure
Yeah.
that I understood, because...
Oh, well, that's a good question. That's a good question, but I thought you could read between the lines on that. But like I say, the longer we wait, and they say, kick the can down the road, but the mayor said, we've been looking at this for 10 years, and he said, it's time to act. Now, how much longer, how many more studies you're gonna do? I said, I've watched that study, it's a good study, but I don't understand bringing minutes into that intersection and all that kind of stuff. I said, basically, we're gonna have, they said, well, we didn't study what the corporations would do, the business coming in here. Hey, it's a given, business is coming into Fayetteville. Whether you want it or not, they're coming here. And it's just like Beaver Lake. Beaver Lake is not gonna sustain us for 25 more years. We're gonna have to make some decisions, hard decisions. And I think the mayor is correct. And I also think Steve Clark's correct. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, who would be next? Oop.
I didn't have to use this, by the way.
I'm good.
Jerry Bailey again. No matter what we build, I'd like to see us start incorporating what it takes to make people get out of their cars. I look at 265, we built the sidewalks along the south side, they're already covered up with weeds. We don't put stripes in all the intersections like at Township when we built the new intersections. There's no striping. When we built Rock Street out here in College, we redid that with the fancy new lights. There's no crossing signals. So we need to start taking pedestrian use seriously and making sure that people would want to get out of their cars. When we build the 4-lane or 2-lane out on the west side, we need to make sure that when we do build those sidewalks that we incorporate the opinions of the people who actually walk, and then have a plan for maintaining them and making sure that they stay walkable. Because again, if you look at South 265, those sidewalks are covered up with weeds. They're not passable. And they're too close to the road. I wouldn't want my kids to ride along there anyway. But sidebar. Also, I'd like to see maybe a monthly AAR with the staff members where we actually walk on those sections or drive those sections that we've built and spent millions of dollars on and see what we could have done better or what we can learn from. If you look at College Avenue, there's huge sections of it that are still not passable. I use the term they're beautiful borders because in many ways I wouldn't want kids on there and people aren't using them, and we have to ask, why aren't people using those? We spent millions of dollars on those sidewalks in College and no one's using them. Not even 1% of the population probably is using those, I would imagine. I ride those every day or walk them, but they're not being used, and we have to ask why. Why are we spending money if people aren't going to use them? It's a waste of time, it's a waste of resources. We might as well stop building sidewalks. Or we can take the attitude, we're going to figure out what we did wrong and try to not do that in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. My name is Jeffrey Huber. I live at 3691 Tower Circle. This is a personal issue to me. I live in Ward 4, and my house currently does butt up against Rupple Road. And so what I want to address tonight is, I understand this bond issue was passed in 2006. I didn't support it, I didn't vote for it, but I understand that it passed in 2006, okay? What we're talking about here isn't a boulevard. It's an arterial, a 4-lane arterial road. And it's going to dampen connectivity between neighborhoods. I've personally seen that in mine. I have a 5-year-old child, a 1-year-old child. Our only trail system is Clapper Creek Trail. And I try to get from my development across that Rupple Road that's been developed. There's not a single crosswalk. Cars travel at over 45 miles per hour along that road currently. It may have a 35 mile per hour speed limit sign, but nobody travels at that speed. And I actually appreciate Alderman Petty's comments. I know I've been in communication with Alderman Kinnon. I've also been in communication with Alderman Adams and Alderman Long. And I think you've got my letter. You actually see, the personal sentiments. But I'm an architect and an urbanist too, and I think that probably came across clear the last few discussions we've had about urban ag. But this is a personal issue with me on Rupple Road, and I think you should consider alternatives. And, I appreciate Alderman Petty's alternative, but I'd ask you to consider a few different things, because you are essentially creating walls through the city. I mean, think about how it feels to move across the street from downtown along 71 to the Washington Willow District. I mean, a lot of people won't choose to walk along those. The reason I think the area of Rupple Road along my house is a huge failure, and this is a 4-lane arterial right now, is that all the development has turned its back to the street. The fact is that all the houses, even Holt Middle School and along Mount Comfort, or from Mount Comfort along Rupple Road, have all gone ahead and do not address that street. That's why nobody respects this 35 mile per hour speed limit sign or 30 mile per hour speed limit sign, when all you have is fences, golf courses, and the backs of houses along roads to look at. So I think if you really are essentially trying to create a boulevard, consider the frontage. I find it absolutely odd that you'll develop a plan with an arterial road that doesn't look at any consideration of the building fabrics around it. And so, I think a form-based code, which obviously you've taken huge strides towards as a city, to address these kind of conditions, I think those will essentially, yes, the road section is correct, but I think the building frontage needs to be considered. And this is important because I think we need to ask ourselves, are we building a city for cars or are we building a city for people? There's absolutely no reason to immediately build Rupple Road as 4 lanes. In fact, again, I appreciate Alderman Petty's in proposing, and I hope that you're receiving countless emails and phone calls in support of his point. But I would like to add my idea to the debate, and I think this aligns with Alderman Marsh's comments earlier about the proposed master plan for this area, is that we need to utilize this extra money, if we would look at 2 lanes, to look at more connectivity in Ward 4 in the fabrics we currently have. We need to address that we need to stop building subdivisions and start building neighborhoods. I just want to, I think there's a critical point in urbanism that they say per square mile you should have about 200 intersections. Just based on my Google Earth count before I came over here today, we have about 74 in a square mile around my house. We're not boding well for connectivity, which creates walkability and good urban environments. And that's why you see a lot of the issues of traffic along these arterials that lead into the city along the east-west corridors. So I think, just to close on, I just asked the council this one question. Would you support an alternative design if it had a different funding source? Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
I'm Garnet Wise, 3190 North Sherrill, Ward 1, I think. I'm a new Environmental Action Committee member, very new, but I'm mostly speaking on behalf of myself. I don't want to claim to speak on behalf of the whole committee, but I do want to point out, you know, what Alderman Marsh read. You know, it seemed long, you know, it might have lost some people's interest in the audience, and but we put a lot of time, a lot of hours into this, and I do think it's important, and just want to remind you the 6 points on the wall behind you, you know, for the 2030 goals. We took all those into account, and the one thing that keeps coming back to me is the Enduring Green Network. You know, I've lived in Fayetteville 7 or 8 years. I'm a big fan of Fayetteville, and so I don't envy your jobs, but I appreciate it, and I think whatever you do, I don't think we're going to be hurting Fayetteville, honestly. So, but I just want you to take into consideration, keep the goals in mind. As far as the Enduring Green Network goes, you know, if the promise is made and the road's going to be built, if it's a foregone conclusion, 4-lane, that's fine. But don't disregard the 6 goals, and don't try to. And this is my plea. Don't try to put in the 6.24 units per acre density to justify the road, because that doesn't match with your goals. You don't want row houses all up and down your Enduring Green Network. You're going to cut off all your pathways for critters, you know, migratory pathways, and you know that density is not. It shouldn't be allowed in an Enduring Green Network. That needs to be part of, you know, zoning's consideration, street planning design for corridors and especially pedestrian bikes as well. So, I'd say at this point, don't try to justify the road by adding more people. I don't think that's supporting your 6 points. I guess the only other thing I want to say is just that I think it's a completely separate note in my mind, but College Avenue, Mr. Petty, I appreciate your comments, and I agree that probably as a completely separate issue, College Avenue needs a lot of attention. But I don't know that I would make it either or, you know. That's part of the challenge you all face. But I appreciate it, and just please keep your 6 goals in mind. Thanks.
Thank you. Who else would be next?
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor. This is my first time to address the council. My name's Paul Rossi, businessman in the community and family in the community, and I just want to I'll be very brief and say I want to lend my support to the 4 lanes. I think it makes total sense. As a businessman, you make decisions years in advance based on decisions made in the city and the momentum that you have to go out and get investors and banks and organize yourself, and you get ready for these sort of things to happen. And to me, this is something that a lot of people are planning on for different reasons. And I just want to say I know that these decisions are often come down to the very end, but it would be there'd be a whole bunch of people that would be surprised if tonight a decision was made for a 2-lane. I mean, it would be. I think the awareness would be shocking. So, thank you again. I appreciate your time and appreciate the council.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name's Charlie Sloan. I live in Ward 4, and I do support keeping this at 4 lanes. 10 years ago, worked with the mayor when he was our councilman, Shirley Lucas, when she was our councilwoman, and we worked hard to get Rupple Road. And we would have liked to add it 10 years ago. Didn't need it. The city didn't do it. Didn't need it at that time, and we had to accept that we were going to be the bottom of the run in Ward 4. You know, I believe if you see the improvements on Weddington, I know it's crowded, but there's a lot of growth happening out there commercial-wise. Something that we fought, that we, not that I had anything commercial to sell, but we supported businessmen wanting to come out there. And for a long time, this council did not want that to happen. It didn't have the infrastructure out there. We do now. You know, we have treatment plants out there. We have water lines out there. We have the roads out there. we do need the Rupple Road. As the mayor had spoke when he was a councilman, this town needs connectivity. And connectivity, none exists really in the sense other than Interstate 540 that I get on every day, like most of the people out there do. Yes, we would love to see Rupple Road. Actually, I'd like to see Rupple Road, the great vision, to be able to go all the way to the mall. That's what we'd like to see, you know. And like I said, that's probably the only relief we're going to ever get, because 540, they can add another lane. It seems to it'll fill up pretty quick, and it's tough out there right now. So I do encourage you to stay with the 4-lane. We were promised this. We supported it. We went out and helped campaign, went to all the meetings, and tried to get the neighbors to come out and vote, and for this to go forward, knowing that it would be a 10-year down the road or longer, depending on the economy project. And now we do support going forward, keeping our promise or would like the city to keep the promise they made to the citizens that we voted for, that this to be a 4-lane project and to be potentially a major corridor. I know it's going to be for traffic for that neighborhood and that area out there, you know, other than our main streets, 540. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. Hello, Shirley.
I'm Shirley Lucas, former Ward 4 Alderman, and I'm here to ask you to reaffirm Rupple Road as presented in the bond issue. We worked very hard to get everybody's opinion, to get the entire, and this is the entire city's project. This is not just Ward 4. This is the entire city's project. We needed to get people out of the center of town because it was so congested. That's why 540 was built. And if we don't have that 4-lane, I just think that the voters voted for it, and it's important. And as you know, we annexed a lot of property out west of Fayetteville. You know, I was the annexation queen. And
yes, we did.
That's what I was nicknamed. And so it was important, and we need to support the businesses. I don't know if you all have been out there, but there is a lot of business out there now, all the way to Double Springs Road. And these people need to have our support to give them some connectivity, so that when people come, they don't have to go to 540 to come back to Weddington. Now, I know 1-lane highway, sure, but that's not as safe as a boulevard. And the mention was that developers need to do the building. This is not a neighborhood road that we get developers to build. This is a thoroughfare that we're trying to get people from the south part of the community to the north part of the community. And like, I would like to see it go all the way to the mall too, because I think it would help our economic development there. We need to look ahead and plan for the future. A lot of times we say, oh well, we'll do it piecemeal and then we'll do it again later. And we get into more trouble doing that. We need to build the 4 lanes now. I know College Avenue needs to be worked on, and I would support that, but I don't think that at this time this should be jeopardized in order to do something for College Avenue. Let me see if it'll cost more later on, but the main thing is the trust of the people. You know, when you vote for something and you think, I voted for that, that's what I want. You lose the trust of the people if you suddenly say, oh well, to heck with how you voted, we're going to do it our way. So I think it's important that if you want people to follow you on another issue later on, you better follow through on what they voted on this time. And so, in conclusion, I ask that you reaffirm Rupple Road, 4 lanes, as the bond issue stated. It's needed, and it needs to be done right now. Thank you all.
Thank you, Shirley.
Shirley, I'd just like to say I really enjoyed serving with you, and I appreciate your service to the City Council.
Thank you very much.
Me too. Yeah.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. I'll be brief. My name's Aaron Worth. I'm with Cobblestone Homes, a builder, developer, and a businessman in the community. We've looked at this road, watched this road for a long time, where I'm in support of the 4-lane. Currently building a mountain ranch which borders Rupple Road at the southernmost. A lot of our plans, what we're planning on doing is based on what we've heard from the city and what they've told us they're going to do. And there's a lot of variables in our business and a lot of risk. And we're looking forward to hopefully spending money out there and building houses and developing. And as far as the zoning, we're looking at that all the time. We work with staff. I just try to find out what makes sense for the city, what obviously makes sense for the market, and meet the demand of what's going out there and good for everybody. So in favor of 4 lanes. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Donna.
I guess I'm going to be the last speaker. I'm Donna Daniels, member of Ward 4. Have been a resident of Ward 4 for approximately 25 years. And many times we have felt like we've been the stepchildren of the city, as the mayor knows, from when he was our alderman. And I went to many meetings with him and with Shirley, and back when Sarah Lewis, before she became an alderman, and what I remember is that Salem Road development. And everyone in Ward 4 was so skeptical about this development that was going to go in. And I still have the plans from the developer. And it's taken a long time, but I am seeing this come together finally. First it was the Walmart market. Now we're getting the Walgreens. They're putting various use in there. We talked about the environmental impact way back then. We had Walmart corporate people come and talk to us about what they were going to do to ensure that the environment was well taken care of. So Ward 4, I feel, has really been at the forefront of many of these issues, and I'm very proud of that, and I'm very proud of the representatives we've had in the past and those we have now. I obviously support the expansion of Rupple Road. My new cut-through from Weddington to Martin Luther King is actually to go to Broyles and then cut through, and once I get to the stoplight in Farmington at Main Street, I turn left because it's safe to turn left there, and then I can easily get into the Lowe's or the Walmart rather than trying to turn left off of Martin Luther King. We have needed a north-south corridor through Ward 4 forever. I've been a resident of Fayetteville for over 30 years. I'm still waiting for an east-west corridor besides going out Highway 45, and I don't know if I'll see that in my lifetime. But for us to have a corridor, a north-south corridor through Ward 4, where we don't have to go all the way out to Double Springs, where we're putting more pressure on Broyles Avenue, which was not built for that. We really need to think about this. I want to thank the staff for all the hard work you did putting this together. I think this plan was very well thought out. We've waited a long time. In terms of population and where people come into Fayetteville, yes, the University of Arkansas is the largest employer. They've been my employer for over 30 years, and they've worked very hard to direct traffic so it's coming off of 540 onto both Martin Luther King and Weddington. And trust me, during football games, I feel it very much as all of the fans are coming through my neighborhood, and I can't walk my dog for fear that I might get run over because people don't care about speed limits. So, just to say, I'm in support of Rupple Road expansion. I think it would be good for many reasons. It goes beyond Fayetteville. It is a regional planning commission artery as well, and we need to vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Okay.
Mayor, Councilman, I'm Gary Head. I'm a local businessman. I was one of those guys that got picked on to raise money when Bobby Farrell was trying to make sure we raised enough money to pay for this. And so I would hope that most of the people here maybe wouldn't understand, but when people vote for something, it becomes really important to them, and people voted for this to be a 4-lane. And Matthew, I got a business in town, and I'm for whatever helps Fayetteville, so I'm not dissuading your point, but when we say we're going to do something, we need to do it. Mayor, I know you said it, many people did, so I hope you'll stick with the plan. Let's build what we, what we said we were going to do, and I appreciate so much the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Okay. Hi, Pam.
Council and Mayor. My name is Pam Henson, and I am a Ward 4 resident, and I live in the Bridgeport subdivision. And it has been a long time to get to this point, as everybody's already said. I'd like to say that where I live, it's hard sometimes in traffic, getting in and out of our locations before we had more development in those areas. And I can honestly say that whenever Mount Comfort was still a 2-lane, we had to deal with the traffic with the school children, where parents would have to turn. And if you're coming and you've got a time schedule and you had to wait, because there was no way that they could get across unless some good Samaritan stopped and let a few cars go. And that was with both ways. People coming out of Salem onto Mount Comfort, they had to wait. But now that is a 4-lane, and it's got a bike lane. It's wonderful. And there was a lot of people who griped and complained and didn't want that to happen, but it happened. And it's a wonderful street now that people can go on, and they can enjoy riding the bikes. They don't have to worry about blocking traffic, which that was another thing on Mount Comfort Road. There was a lot of times you'd get behind someone that was riding a bicycle, and you'd be behind them for a long time. And you know how frustrating that is when you're trying to get somewhere and you need to get there within a certain time limit. And then we go to Weddington. I could go to Weddington and get out, but I had to go through Meadowlands. And you know how that is. That was before the 4-lane was. I've lived in Bridgeport for 14 years. And I've seen a lot of growth. I've seen a lot of things. I've had to be patient with a lot of things out there, along with everybody else that lives in that area, and they know what I'm talking about. And I remember when I would try to get onto Weddington to come to work in the mornings, that I would have to look both ways, and finally when I would find a gap, I would gas it and get out there and hope to goodness that I didn't get hit getting out there, because there was no other way to go except for Mount Comfort. You had the problem there before that was taken care of. And then Tracy Hoskins, thank you Tracy, because he is the one that finally got a residential neighborhood through where I live now, and I can take Rupple Road, and I take it every day. The reason why is because we have a stoplight on Rupple to turn onto Weddington. And I can say that whenever that first started, when we had the signal light there, it did not have a turn lane, a signalization turn lane where you could turn at a certain time. And there were times I had to wait 3 times to get turned because of the traffic in the mornings going to school traffic. And plus now we have so many developments. We have commercial, we have Lindsay Properties over where I live. I mean, it has just grown. We're getting a new Walgreens. It's fixing to open. I'm very excited about the growth in our area. I mean, it's like our own city. We have no need of going, not saying anything to college, but we have everything we just about need in Ward 4, just about. We can have our own little place to go to shop and to eat, whatever we have need of, just about. So we really need to take, like everybody else has said, to take this in consideration, and I am for getting the 4 lanes to Rupple from Martin Luther King up to Weddington, or is it Persimmon? Is that where? Yeah. But anyway, just getting that 4-lane boulevard. And I was thinking about that, the 4-lane boulevard. We've had a lot of talk about issues about that, but I think if we put a lot of planning into that and going by all the principles that we've mentioned, Sarah Marsh's comments, there's a lot of things that we can do to make sure that that's done the way it should be done. It doesn't have to be just like that. It can be done a little at a time and done right. And I can see things. I know there's times that I've had to let the Razorback Transit bus stop at the stoplight going through Weddington, and cars would have to stop on the other side to let that bus get through to turn down on and it's at Betty Jo Drive, because it couldn't get through. The traffic was so bad there. So if we get that opened up from Martin Luther King up to that, I just think that will be a wonderful way for all of us in Ward 4 to get less time having to sit in traffic and wait. We can get to work from where we need to go in the mornings, the afternoons, or in between. It'll just be wonderful to have that. Plus, in the future, I'm thinking about how wonderful that will be that if it opens up all the way maybe to the mall areas and stuff. That will be our main road. So it is the heart. It is the heart of Ward 4. And so I just ask you to go ahead and do the whole 4 lanes with the bike lanes, the sidewalks, the median, everything. It's going to be beautiful if we do it the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. She doesn't talk this much at work. She's excited. Thank you, Pam.
Here I am again. Tracy Hoskins, and first
You know, that's the first time I've ever heard anybody say anything nice about you, Tracy.
well, you know, actually, I'd like to thank Pam for giving me the shout out there about that connection between Bridgeport and Rupple Road. We worked really hard to get that done. I think the mayor remembers that.
I do.
Yeah, that was quite a deal. And I'll make this brief or what have you. While I appreciate what Alderman Petty has brought up tonight, at least if nothing else, he has brought to the attention, or actually, that North College has got issues, and we really need to do something with North College. And we would hate for it to go by the wayside of some of the other areas, the say sister stretches of North College to the north or what have you. You know, North College and Midtown and Uptown is our economic engine. We really need to support that. We really need to develop that, redevelop that. With that being said, I also understand that there may be an issue with moving money from one place to another, and of course, you know, firm on giving the voters what they were promised. I'm also one of those people that think about curing problems, and I think that sometimes we get so mired down in what's transpired, we may not be looking at what's good for us today. And so anyhow, you know, I know the bond issue and all that occurred also, you know, prior to the crash, when development, especially in West Fayetteville, was going absolutely wild. Well, that's not the case anymore. And so, you know, things change. And so, you know, I guess one of my questions is, you know, we take 4 lanes and we load all that traffic from MLK to Weddington Drive. Once we get it there, what are we going to do with it? We've got issues at both the interchanges at MLK and 540 and Weddington Drive as it is. And we're getting ready to exacerbate that on Ways Drive. I know that we're working on making some changes to the interchange at Weddington Drive, and you know, hopefully those will be coming pretty soon. But still, you know, dumping all that extra traffic up there, I'm very concerned about that because Weddington Drive right now is an absolute nightmare. I'm out there every single day, several times a day, and actually moving to Ward 4. And so I guess my question would be, you know, when do we make that other connection from Weddington Drive all the way up to Highway 112/Van Ash or what have you? Is it better to have a 4-lane road today from MLK to Weddington Drive, or is it possible that it's better to have a 2-lane road from MLK that connects all the way to Highway 112? Of course, I'm sure there are many issues with that as well, but I'd be kind of curious of when, you know, what our plans are, when that's going to occur, that extra connection of improvements, say, from midway between Weddington Drive and Mount Comfort Road along Rupple, and then a connection up to Highway 112. My personal opinion is I would much rather see a fully connected 2-lane road than a partially built 4-lane road in hopes of getting the other half one of these days.
Okay, thank you. Who else would like to address us? Mr. Clark.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Steve Clark. I'm a resident in Ward 1. I'm the president and chief executive officer of the Fayetteville Chamber of Commerce. I wrote to all of you today to urge you to support and reaffirm the development of 4 lanes along Rupple Road, as has been recommended by your staff, as has been presented to voters, has been debated and discussed in this city for months and years. Listening to the discussion tonight, particularly about this very issue, I thought about both what I'd said to you today in my email and what might be the results tonight if you voted not to make Rupple Road 4-lane. Joel Walsh is sitting over here, the flyer is sitting over here, both to my right. Their stories tomorrow and the few days to come will be city plans to develop 15th Street. City plans to develop Rolling Hills Drive. Because those were some of the big ideas that were thrown out here tonight. City plans to develop 2 lanes from MLK to 112 or Van Ash or whatever. In other words, for what I said to you in my email was that people watch and listen. People watch and listen what the 9 of you do. People make decisions on what the 9 of you do. And they rely upon what the 9 of you do. And they rely upon you as an institution, not individuals. Because your predecessors took positions that some of you are honoring now. And in doing that, they recognize this institution has credibility and reputation, and it does. And so I think the issue, I believe, as your economic development advisor, for you to consider in reaffirming the 4-lane proposal for Rupple Road, is what is the impact of the decisions that have been made going forward, and have there been actions taken based on those decisions, and are there new actions coming? I'll give you an example of an action taken based on previous decisions. Stories written, appearing in the newspaper, appearing online, saying the city will do, based on comments that came from the institution, the city council, and the institution, the office of the mayor. Walgreens was mentioned. I had a conversation with the developer of Walgreens. That's a $7 million plus project. That site was deliberately chosen because Rupple Road would be 4 lanes and Weddington will be 4 lanes. I mean, that's the words right out of the man's mouth. He just said, we wanted other sites. We wanted to be on the west side of town. We knew the west side of town is growing at a fevered pace. We see the Walmart market. We see the health club. We see the new church. We see the new restaurants. We see the addition to the Boys and Girls Club. We see that the new restaurants are continuing to come. We see these developments. And so we wanted to be a place, and we wanted to be not at the corner of where Weddington intersects 540, a little further down the road, past Ozark Electric, other places, but at a hub where our business would draw from that area and draw from the area south as potentially the area north. And so what I said to you in my email, and I reaffirm to you tonight, as an institution, people watch what you do and what you say, and they rely on it. And for businesses to make judgments, to create a business or to expand a business or to relocate a business, they can't do it on 30, 60, 90 days notice. They have to do it on 12, 24, and 36 months of planning. As Gary Head, president of one of our local financial institutions, said, you have to plan. You got to get your financing in place. You've got to get your permitting and approval from the city. You've got to know you meet those standards that will allow that business to be created, relocated, or expanded. I think tonight has been a very, in some ways, invigorating night, because it's been a night of big ideas. Not just this issue, but other issues that came along. But on this issue, big ideas. And that's one of the things that, as an institution, you make our city proud. You make our city proud. Our citizens have respect for you and pride for you because you think of big ideas. And you act with big ideas. And big ideas include some of the things that Councilman Petty has talked about. Big ideas include some of the things that Councilman Marsh has talked about. They absolutely do. And this institution, this city council, always embraces big ideas. But in embracing big ideas, you also have to be cognizant of the path you've laid out. And the path you've laid out, as I see it, and as the city staff presented it, which I find to be an accurate representation, said that the city in developing on the west side of 540 was looking to develop both business and jobs, residential homes and multifamily homes, institutions like schools and living centers for seniors and other sorts of private schools, because all those things are a part of that, fire stations, Boys and Girls Clubs, all manufacturing. There's Delta Group Electronics over there, part of Mountain Ranch. It is truly what we had hoped to develop as a city that had many multiple uses that could be a part of a living environment. And so, in this instance, that's what you said you were going to do. That's what this institution, the City Council, and this institution, the Office of the Mayor on behalf of the city said, that's what we're going to do. For economic development to continue, people have to be able to rely on that. They have to be able to rely on that. And they rely on that because they read it in the paper. They saw it on the news at 5, 6, and 10. They read it in the flyer. They read it in the City Wire. Because they don't come to these meetings. You've had as big a crowd here tonight as you've had in a while. They don't come to these meetings. They get their information about your institution, the City Council, and your institution, the Office of the Mayor, and the spokesman and the Chief Executive of the city, through what these reporters report, and what their opinion writers write, and what their columnists write. And so in this instance, what they've been told was, we're going to expand and grow that west side of our city. And we're going to grow it in a smart way, which I think has been done in very many instances. But like any growth, it has presented some of its own problems. And a study that's based on usage, which has some questions at the core of how you measure the empirical data, is one that's based on residences, not businesses. You just heard a Ward 4 resident say, I now don't have to cross 540 if I'd like to go to eat. I now don't have to cross 540 if I'd like to get a half gallon of milk or fresh strawberries or get protein products. I now don't have to cross 540 to find recreation. I now don't have to cross 540 to find public education. I now don't have to cross 540 to find charter education. I now don't have to cross 540, and it just goes on and on and on. And all those businesses came because of the statements made by your two institutions. I think those were smart statements. That makes it easy for me, as your economic advisor, when promoting our city, to say, we plan, and we seek input, as you've been doing tonight, and then we act. And we go back and plan again to make sure we've acted in the very best way that we could and with the very best information, and you keep doing those things. But we plan, we get input, and then we act. Well, you have. And now it's time to act again. I can tell you there are people who come to our office and ask, is there going to be some land for development out there on the west side of the city? And the answer is yes. Yes, because there aren't other places in our city for development. We have said no to lots of people in the last 30 days. Lots of people meaning 4 or 5, but that's a lot to me if that meant 100 jobs. 4 or 5 people who were looking for a place where they were looking was not on the west side, and we didn't have something on the south end or the north end or the east side. And so I urge you to reaffirm the decision that's been made before. I urge you to propose and continue the proposal that Rupple Road be 4 lanes. I equally urge you to listen and hear what Councilman Petty said, because I think that's important to our economic future. I urge you to listen and hear what Councilman Marsh said. I think that's important to our economic future for the years. But I don't want to mix the decision tonight about Rupple Road with hearing those issues and big ideas, because they all can't be and won't be decided tonight, and should not be. But they should not be ignored. So I'll conclude as I started. I wrote to you this afternoon. Today, I urged you to vote to support Rupple Road as a 4-lane road, as it has been proposed before. I submit to you that is the proper decision, the one that will best serve our city and will best serve the institutions that you represent, the City Council, the leaders of our community, and the Mayor and the Chief Executive of our community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Okay.
Getting late, I'm sorry.
All right.
I wish Steve had been around when, speak that well against building a boys' club out there where it is, on Rupple Road, and closing the one about 3/4 of a mile from here, next to the high school, and closing Jefferson School, and closing Bates School. A lot of changes have come to South Fayetteville, and one of them is we don't have a boys' club down there anymore, and kids have to ride a bus a lot earlier in the morning to leave and so forth. So that's school board stuff. But everybody relates to the city plan, 2030 goals. We will make appropriate infill. It says appropriate infill. What's going on infill in South Fayetteville is not appropriate. And that's why every time I hear that one cited, it sort of makes me sick. The fact is that we, thank goodness you guys finally got past the urban agriculture thing. All the old houses in Fayetteville, once you drop off this hillside, have yards that'll grow gardens. The new ones that are replacing them don't. They red dirt them. Now this is something that you can deal with ahead of time if there is a plan made for the land along Rupple Road, because much of it's prairie and much of it's wetland, and if you make sure that it's understood ahead of time, and the planning department and planning commissioners recognize that keeping the option of growing food on that kind of land for the future owners, not the ones that buy these newest houses that are projected to go in there because the road's widened. You got to look at all those. We'll discourage urban sprawl. Okay, is it sprawl or is it healthy protection of the land if you have several acres between houses? We will make traditional town form the standard. What's on MLK right down here, south of here, that's town form. That's old town form. Little row houses. And they're right up close to the street. But they're not necessarily the best thing. They did leave good backyards and a little bit of front yard. We will grow a livable transportation network. And if this road is not 4 lanes, it won't be a very good part of that because you won't have a place for buses. And if we, along with that swale in the center of the street, if it's allowed to have enough soil to soak water in, will do wonders. The trees will actually survive there. They won't have to be replaced the way they are so many places. And I was part of the group working on the Enduring Green Network, and I looked at so much land out there on the west side, all those places. You know, you go and you'd find the right vegetation in places. You would find the good soil in all those places. And those are the things that people were moved here for, places they could grow food and raise a family without being in a crowded environment too. Anyhow, and we're still not creating opportunities for attainable housing. The prices, even on the partners board, which I'm a part of, prices are going up on what it's going to cost to buy one of those things. But anyway, I'm sorry to speak this late, and but I did enjoy the fact that I stayed here and wasn't distracted by maybe turning on another station if I'd been home to see some local basketball team play or something, which all of you missed, and I have too. Bobby Farrell was itching to go, but he stayed a long time to speak his mind, and I was proud of him. He wanted to He could have been at the ballgame. Anyway, yes, follow through on the plan that was made and authorized and that you promised. And that doesn't mean that you do it at any cost. It means, in my mind, that you will take advantage of some of this low-impact development planning and educate the public more about that. Because it doesn't have to be the kind of disaster so many of our highways are. Thank you.
Thank you all. Okay. Who else would like to address us? Okay. Oh, Councilman.
To me every time.
Yes,
My name is Don Marr. I have been a resident of Ward 3, Ward 2, and Ward 4. So I guess I need to move next to Ward 1, and I'll have everyone covered. I wanted to speak tonight as, I guess, a prior member of the Sister and Brotherhood of Council members, and tell you, first of all, what I love about tonight is I love working for this city because I listened to this debate, and I think what a better alderman I would have been had I had not only served with some of you sitting up there bringing points today, but things that you're teaching us to think about as we move forward. I listen to the public, and I think there are points that are being made that are passionate and important. What I loved about hearing from Matthew was factual decision-making. I think it's important as a council member to be focused on that, to have focused priorities. I love that point, and I think it was a good lesson. Unity in strategic thinking. I think it's important that while we challenge ourselves with thinking, it's important to realize that as elected officials, that leadership and unity is important for the public to have confidence in us in our decision-making. What I love is local knowledge that you have, because I don't think there's any study that will ultimately tell you every factual aspect. I think living here and experiencing it is just as much a part of decision-making, and all of you have that, as well as all of the public. I think appropriate design, the things that we heard coming from the Environmental Actions Committee, and to have a committee that's not against something, but promoting themes is just exciting to me. But I also think about the opportunity of a four-lane discussion is the first time in my life here in Fayetteville, which is 28 years as of this year, that we have an opportunity to develop from the beginning correctly. We're talking about solving problems and fixing items that are already built, against having the opportunity to build an example of what we want right from the very beginning. I think about Council Member Marsh wanting us to have roads that had indented medians to capture water, and I see that in the design that Chris presents today as an LID component that was merely a thought on a piece of paper years ago, and our excuse was we can't do that because every road is a state highway, and we can't get permission to do that. We now have an opportunity to show it works, to build it in a way that is effective, that allows us to reduce water cost in irrigation, to affect water quality and filtration, the advantages that she talked about at that time to educate us. I love the fact you're talking about zoning, and that the road will be built with commercial nodes that our policy talks about, and neighborhoods that aren't with highways running through them, and having connectivity built out from the beginning that addresses north and south. When I listened to Ms. Daniels talk about the cut through the Broyles, that's exactly what I did when I lived there. And because you are going to find a way to get to where you need to, and you hope it's safe, and I think the city has a responsibility as leaders to help us build our major network. So we don't fight about Cleveland wasn't built to be an arterial collector. We have an opportunity to build one so that it's there from the beginning. We've made these decisions as a city. The Enduring Green Network that we talk about was an action that the council made and reaffirmed a master street plan with that knowledge of this Enduring Green Network being here and the opportunity to show it can be built correctly with consideration from the beginning, rather than fighting about it later. I think the reason that the public trust and voter trust is such an important issue in this decision is because to do the very things that Matthew brings up, which I, frankly, having been a former council member for Ward 2, I also think is a citywide item that I support. When you look at 42% of your population, your job items, I think those are excellent points about it. But I think the best way to ensure that is to not have the public lose trust and be willing to vote in a referendum in the future. This bond issue will pay off, projected in 2024. And at that point, there's a lot of factors, but assuming interest rates, assuming sales tax growth, there's an opportunity for another $125 to $150 million of investment. And I think the way to get that money to apply to these very priorities you talk about is to have the public say, you told us you would do this, and you did it. And so I'm going to trust you to do it again. The street committee that Mayor Jordan was on at the time with me, Swifty Reynolds and Bobby Farrell, one of the items that we researched in our discussion about a referendum was Fort Smith, because they had done a bond issue at the time for roads. And the feedback that we got, not only from elected officials, from administration, and from the general citizenry, was the reason we supported this and the reason we've renewed this is because the city said what it was going to do, and it did it. I want to give you another community that you can think about, and that was Little Rock, who went for years unable to pass a tax because there was a vote made for a particular tax for projects that was reused on something else. It was a part of the whole discussion with the library project and the things that were going on there at the time. And they went over decades before they could get another tax passed under the, at least what was written about, was the public's trust of whether the elected officials would do with it with what they said. And that's why I think it's important in this scenario. I think the points you brought up are extremely important. I'm so challenged by the thinking that Matthew throws out, and I think it gives me a good perspective as staff to think about bringing that forward. You know, what goes through my mind is, okay, if zoning plan to come with this, what does that mean? How do you want it done? Because what I don't want to do is delay the project another year. We made a decision in May to study this, and we're now in March. And so 10 months later, we still need to continue with the next step of it. And time is money. That is one thing, as leaders, we all know that the city has experienced. So I think it's important to move forward. I hope that what is not lost in his presentation tonight is this factual decision-making, this focused priority and consideration for college. And I think that's why all of you have supported the $2 million when you had extra money to continue to go in this. I think the message that he's saying is, let's just not stop with that and consider that we're done. And I think that's a valid point. But I don't think we should do it at the expense of what our council did, what we went to the public with, and the public trust, because I think it's going to be important to get future funding to continue those plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Okay. Yes, you sure can.
Dignity Village, we got a problem here in Fayetteville with the homeless, and I'd just like you to study this information about Dignity Village. I'd like to give this to Sarah, because I heard she likes to hold trees and homeless people.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Thank you very much for staying late and listening to all of our opinions. My name is Marilyn Shoffett. I live in Ward 2, and I'm a long-term resident of Northwest Arkansas. And I know that really what I'm going to say is really more a statement, because I think this is a done deal, and we do have to keep our word. I don't necessarily agree with all of it. I'm also a realtor, so I sell real estate all over Northwest Arkansas and especially Fayetteville. I have a lot of people that come here that want to live downtown. If I had a choice between having a listing out on Rupple Road or in center of Fayetteville, I'll take the listing in the center of Fayetteville any day, because that's a demand for where people want to live. So I'd like to make this very people-friendly instead of auto-friendly, and that's very hard to do because people love their automobiles. And they're not going to give them up. They will downtown, but out there, I don't know how much they will. So things have changed a lot in 10 years. It's changed a lot in 30 years. If you'd asked me in the 80s that we would have a department in the city of Fayetteville for sustainability, I would have told you that was impossible. But we have it. If you had asked me if we were going to have a bike trail all the way to Bella Vista, I would tell you, are you crazy? But now we're going to have it in the next few years, and we have a great bike trail system. So, I want to see really good growth like everybody does. If you ask my children to plan this highway, they would plan it differently than what we're planning it. But they're the ones that are going to live it. And so, I just want to ask you to think real hard about the money you spend out there. I know we've given our word, and we're going to have to do it. Maybe we could stretch it out and make the money go further. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to bring it back to the council. Well, would anyone like to start, or have we? Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I think what we have is another example of as we've heard, of the great ideas that we have when we discuss issues here in our city. The vision that we have for College Avenue is grand, and it's not going to be forgotten, and it wasn't forgotten early on, as we already did appropriate some money, and we will continue to do that, I hope, as a council. It is the ward that I represent, and it's where I live, and I love that area, and being a native of this area, I know that College Avenue is the main street for the heritage of our city. But also, I know that we realistically, because I'm from the west side of the county, being raised in Prairie Grove and heading out that way a lot, the growth has been incredible. And we've got to seriously stand by our word, I think, in managing the growth out there responsibly, just like we have talked here tonight, and I think that we have that opportunity. This has been a very tough issue for me, because with Mr. Clark and Mr. Petty, we have met with merchants in the Midtown area to try to come up with solutions on College Avenue. This is not something that we're blind to, and I certainly appreciate our economic development commitment and our partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, because they are already handling this issue and they have recognized it. And we must move forward in preserving this heritage of the Main Street of Fayetteville, and that is College Avenue, but at the same time realistically understand that we have a promise and a commitment to the development of the west side of town. And again, because of my personal traffic, the way I travel is generally to the west, I tell you what, that intersection at I-540 going to Salem is the most terrifying thing that I experience in my routine. And we've got to manage the Weddington, we've got to manage it, and we've got to get north and south from Weddington, Martin Luther King, and we will do it. We'll do it correctly. And I really, to have our Environmental Action Committee come forward with such a great document to offer a vision, to have Alderman Petty commit a great deal of time. I often tell Matthew this, don't I, Matthew? It's like, I'm a banker, I'm a businessman, I'm an old man. I depend a lot on my beliefs, my attitudes, and values based on my experiences, and I can become a banker, a businessman, and an old dude. But Matthew keeps the vision fresh, and he brings me the most exciting opportunities because we do have that dialogue. So Matthew, I appreciate that all the time. The information that I get from him is great. Tonight, however, I'm going to stand by the word of the council. Back whenever we initiated this program, I was active in our neighborhood. I did attend meetings where I saw the presentation. I appreciate the expense that has already been, that we've already invested in downtown, and we have seen the results. Some people might not like backing in their space in Block Street, but let me tell you, isn't that a great improvement already? College Avenue, the lights, even though we have a big hole across from the courthouse, we do have a sidewalk, and we do have the opportunity to develop that because we have the infrastructure in there now, and we'll continue to do that. But as I vote this evening, I hope that the community does understand it's been a very invigorated, a very vigorous discussion with a lot of opportunities that we have to face in the future, and the vote is to stand by the word of the council. But the presentation and the information that I've received through such an interactive community will certainly set forward the vision that we have for College Avenue, and it won't be forgotten. To me, it is not and or. And really, the bottom line comes back to something that we've heard all of our time, for a long time. A stitch in time saves 9, right? And I think that this stitch in time is to do the 4-lane, and then it will save us in the long run, and we can develop it correctly. So that's why I'm supporting this.
Yes, Justin.
Well, I'll be voting to reaffirm this as well, but I do want to thank Alderman Petty, because the main reason that I began to consider both sides was because of the initial conversations and items that he's brought forward. And Matthew always, in my opinion, and I appreciate this very, very much, is very detailed in his research and brings a lot of really, really good ideas. And I think this North College idea that he has is an out-of-the-box thinking type idea that we need to keep alive and keep as in continual motion as we possibly can, because North College has been, I think all of us agree, it needs attention. Right now, there's too many reasons to go ahead and vote for the Rupple Road 4 lanes, but I want to really thank him for his work, and hope that he keeps beating the drum. I know that he will, and I'll listen. So thank you very much.
Anybody else? Yes, Deb.
I want to thank Matthew, too. Appreciate all the hard work you went into preparing this. And I had originally thought that I wanted the 2 lanes, but then the more I listened to the commitment made, I knew that that's what we had to do. And also listening to the Ward 4 alderman, and then so many folks from Ward 4. So I think for me, it's a win-win. We've gotten some great ideas for college. We've gotten great ideas for making our highway better. But I think we have to do our 4-lane highway and then keep those other things in mind as we go. I will be voting to affirm the 4-lane.
I will too. But I want to say it's a pleasure to work with Matthew on the street committee, and you come to the committee every time with ideas and thoughts outside of the box, and I think some of these things that we've heard tonight will be brought back to street committee. And Chris Brown, you do a fabulous job with that committee, and appreciate you so much, and thanks for all the work on this. Appreciate you.
Anybody else? Yes, Matthew.
I guess that makes my ego back to its regular level. Well, like I said, whenever I was down at the podium, you know, I do believe unity is the most important thing. And, you know, coming up with this proposal, we hadn't really heard from a lot of people about or at least I hadn't, because I wasn't here in 2006, about how important the bond issue was. And I don't want anybody to think that I'm deaf to public input. I'm not. That's why I started this saying how appreciative I am of my relationship with the council and the mayor, and that's why I started this by saying unity was the most important thing tonight. I said in my presentation that I would vote for this if that's what the council wanted, and I will. And I'm proud to do it. And I'm also extremely grateful that we've seen the council tonight affirm that not just we need to honor the public's wishes, but that we have larger issues and more complicated issues and perhaps opportunities that we haven't tackled and that we're committed to doing so. I think the future is bright for us.
Sarah.
There's been quite a bit of discussion tonight about promises, and we also made another promise, and that's to all of the citizens, especially those that took part in our master planning charrette. We made a promise to uphold the City Plan 2030, and the City Plan 2030 goals aren't posted in our council chambers for decoration. They're here to remind us of the guiding principles that our citizens have set forth for us. Our City Plan 2030 tells us to make appropriate infill and revitalization our highest priority. And we need to reinvest in our Main Street, which is our 71B corridor. We need to invest in improving the infrastructure that supports our existing businesses and economic base, those people that have already invested in us, before we gamble on speculative future development. And we must support infill and revitalization by making highest and best use of our existing infrastructure before we potentially overbuild new infrastructure. Let's put this money where we know we need it, rather than where we think we might. And by improving the appearance and safety of our Main Street, we create value beyond what appears on a balance sheet by making Fayetteville a nicer place to live, to work, and to visit. And by making our Main Street more attractive, maybe we can make it a magnet for new businesses and private investment again, so that they don't all feel the need to go out to the West End. Our City Plan 2030 tells us to discourage suburban sprawl. It tells us to support the integrity of our enduring green network. It tells us to grow a livable transportation network. You know, we don't need more roads because there's too much traffic. We need more roads because we don't have viable alternatives to single occupancy vehicles. If in 10 years we need 4 lanes on this roadway, then I would posit that we've failed to grow a livable transportation network. Rather than planning for failure, I would prefer to see us build for success. You know, I received an avalanche of letters in support of spreading this money around and reinvesting in our 71B corridor, and I will be supporting future efforts to do this. I'm not a fan of the 4-lane proposal, but I recognize the need to honor our bond issue. And I will work to make it as successful as possible by advocating for the implementation of the recommendations of the Environmental Action Committee, especially the recommendation to produce a complete neighborhood plan and rezone the area prior to construction.
Okay. Anybody else? Well, I don't know what to say. I think we've said it all tonight, haven't we? I mean, really. It's been a long time. We, at a Ward 4 meeting, we knew that it was, you know, things do change. In 2003, when we proposed the boulevard, everybody thought, wow, we've never seen anything like that. And now, you know, the boulevarded road is sort of standard. I mean, it was just so groundbreaking, we thought at the time, but You know, now we look at different designs, patterns, roundabouts, and things, and it's remarkable. We worked so hard to pass that bond issue in 2006, so very hard. We'd never seen anything like that many projects, and we had 13, 14 projects that was the list that street committee put together. And I was the representative for Ward 4, and on that committee, it was probably the most expensive road project but everybody else wanted the different things in their ward, so I gave up building that road. And the people waited, and they were patient. And then 2008 comes along, and then it becomes 2010, and then it becomes 2012, and people ask me, Mayor, when is this going to be done? We have waited all this time. And so, all these projects, and I could go through the list, Mount Comfort, Cato, Wilson Park, Fayetteville Expressway, Flyover, College Avenue, Zion, Huntsville Road, Crossover, Garland, are either done or being done. And still, the people out west wait. And I appreciate you all's support, because none of you were here in 2004, and when we made those promises. I'm the only one left, myself, and of course, Dawn and Shirley. It's good to see you. Lord, she had her hands full with me when we were together. She was always very patient, very kind. It's good to see you. But it's just been a long time, and we've got to keep, as I've said, we've got to just keep our word. Just what we said. Enduring Green Network, and it's wonderful. It's great stuff. Matthew, I think your ideas are fantastic on college, and I know that folks have tried to pit me against you, and I have not done that. I won't do that.
Me neither, Mayor.
We have, the Ward 4 council members that have stood the test of time, and now they are standing up for the same road that we did, and I appreciate you and the staff. And I have, as I close, there's an old adage that I use, and the staff has heard me say this a zillion times. Well, maybe not a zillion, but there's an old adage: when you build something, you build it once, you build it right, and you build it forever. And that's what we're going to do with this road. Thank you. Okay. Sandra, would you please call the... Oh.
There is a motion and a
There's
second.
a motion.
Yes, there is. Hours ago.
There is. But was there a second?
Second.
Yes, I second.
No,
Yeah, we're good.
To amend.
Yeah.
To amend, I'll second the amendment.
Mhm.
Was there a motion to amend? Or a second to amend?
Oh,
To bring forth a rezoning study. Was that the motion, Matthew?
I
Oh.
did make that motion. I figured there wasn't a second.
Was an amendment.
to amendment to your motion to put a rezoning plan.
Ask staff to bring forward a rezoning proposal as they brought forward the contract to build the road.
May I amend your amendment to require a complete neighborhood plan before we do that?
Okay. Well, now we have
Got more time for public comment.
We have more time for public comment.
I'm not gonna support that tonight, but I think we should talk about that because a neighborhood plan is gonna take a lot more than just a simple rezoning proposal.
Oh, yeah. Amend the resolution. That's amending the resolution.
Okay, what are we gonna do
Proposing
here?
an amendment to the resolution.
Just, somebody let me know. We have a rezoning. Well, we have
An
that, but
amendment
we
to-
can put, I think, Marty, an amendment on the,
Yes, an amendment, I think, is in order.
That's what I
The
remember.
original motion has not passed at this point in time.
But you have to vote on the amendment first, and
Right,
then the
and
motion.
the amendment, I guess, would be something that, city council hereby requests that staff come forward with a rezoning, request prior to the, contract being approved by the city council.
That's
Something like
accurate.
that.
Okay. Do we?
The contract for construction
Yeah,
is what
that's
we're talking about.
Chris?
That's what I was
What?
That's what I was
What he was
gonna
in
ask,
there.
whether it's design
Okay.
or construction.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay. All right, let's have discussion on that. So what comments do we have in the council on that?
I think that Alderman Petty's motion is consistent with the Environmental Action Committee's recommendations for environmental best management practices, and I think it's important to have a plan in place prior to development of the corridor so that we don't develop it piecemeal and we have the better ability to direct development to ensure that we have the density that will support the expenditure.
Okay. Yes, Alan.
I would like to see what your amendment is, and I would like to see what that neighborhood design is, or the rezoning is, but I'd really like to just vote on the 4 lanes, and then have time, at least 2 weeks or a week from an agenda session, to look at what you're proposing. I think it sounds great. Be happy to look at it, but I'm not someone to jump on voting for rezoning without having time to look at the master zoning plan and...
No, but, the motion is to ask staff to bring forward to develop a proposal, not to rezone any properties right now. It will take much longer than 2 weeks to develop a rezoning proposal.
Well, what is
Okay,
that?
I understand.
What is that going to do to the timing of the road? Chris, isn't there something that you all were needing to have?
Mayor, the reason I asked the question about whether it was to be done prior to the construction or prior to the contract for design is we need to get started on the design components for, the affirmed, whatever the council decides on that item. It'll be some length of time before we're prepared for construction, and, we feel like that will give us the length of time to bring forward the zoning discussions that, the council members who've made that amendment are talking about.
And this could also be brought up as a separate resolution later, too, even if it's not included tonight as a subsection 2. I mean...
You don't want to do it as a separate thing later, or are we...
You know, I'm content with that, but we're already here.
Okay. Well, okay. So the amendment is to do a rezoning plan, and we have a second. So since nobody's going to remove anything, I guess we'll discuss the amendment. All right, what's the conversation on the amendment then?
I have a question about that.
Okay.
Maybe for Jeremy. Does that mean that we would have public input on, are you looking at, how would you start to make a plan? Would you include public input?
I would assume we would. I'm not sure exactly how that process would work. We just need to talk about it. Obviously, we have a city plan. What we're understanding is just we're really looking at rezoning that area around the corridor. We've done corridor master plans before, so we just really need to talk about our current work plan that we have scheduled through the next year and see if we can do a full-blown master plan, or if it's more of a simple zoning study, just looking at essentially, likely what I've heard tonight, more of our form-based codes, looking at the environment context of the project, the infrastructure project, and then where we're wanting to go with that. So I think there's a number of ways you can bring forward a zoning proposal, and we, the city, have done those both ways. We've simply brought forward a proposal to you like we do with some of the expired PZDs, where we simply look at our master plans and identify what we feel are best options, or a full-blown master plan or something in between, kind of like we did with the Huntsville Road project. So we'll just have to discuss that a little further and bring forward a recommendation to the council.
I do want to be clear in the reason, I think Matthew's comment about the comprehensive master plan, neighborhood master plan, is a very different time, cost, and budget requirement than a zoning plan. We're not opposed to that, but if that's the direction that the council's wanting to go, then we're going to need an appropriation for that, because that doesn't come with, I mean, that has a lot more items, as you know, from having gone through the Weddington plan or the Walker Park Neighborhood Plan, for an area of this size.
Yes, Sarah, and yes, you sure can.
Yeah, we have I would recommend that we base the rezoning plan on the Weddington Corridor Master Plan, the 2030 City Plan, and the environmental best practices recommendations for developing within the Enduring Green Network. I think that that would capture a lot of the concerns without having to go through a lot of the public input sessions and the more arduous pieces of developing a complete neighborhood plan. We have a lot of guiding documents already in existence, and we should just work from those.
Yeah, oh, yes, ma'am.
Look, I don't want to raise anybody's body temperature over here, so let's give staff some time to come up with the work plan, and then we'll see if it's a good idea.
Thank you.
Okay, so.
So I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay. All right.
Okay, now we're back to the regular resolution, and there has been a motion and a second to pass the resolution
Yes.
as written.
Reaffirm. Okay. Is everybody good? Okay. Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Delighted. Long.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Marsh.
Yes.
Kenyon.
Yes.
Petty.
Yes.
Tennant.
Yes.
Shopmire. Adams.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, council, very much. Do you all want a short break, or do you want to plow on?
Right down.
All righty.